Welcome back to Raised by Giants, and welcome everyone in the chat, moderators and members out there. Thank you very much for tuning in, even though it's a little later of a show than we normally do, but it's worth it. Doing it later this evening because we have with us tonight the creator of Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube, discussing energetic changes on Earth as the sun repeats its 400-year cycle of low activity, affecting global crop production, the economy, and everyone on our planet, with a timeline of what you can expect from now to 2030 as society resets. A warm welcome back to the show, David DuByne. Thanks so much for coming on, brother. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's been a busy 3.5 weeks trying to dive into history through Croatia and then up into Italy and then back over here to Taiwan with a different set of eyes, specifically looking for the event and trying to tie in timelines, rewritten history, the historical records of why some places were abandoned. And with the archaeologists that I'd spoken to, it seems that you can definitively find these time periods, but they're not exactly sure from one destructive phase to another exactly which decade it occurred, but it's in the record everywhere now that you look, from the oil paintings to the lithographs to the stone carvings. It doesn't matter, the historical accounts, the nautical museum and the port records, and everywhere you look, it seems that it's detached, but the dots are enough out there that if you start to look for them, you can find certain groupings of these dots that point to different timelines. And that's what the whole last 3.5 weeks was about, from Croatia into Italy. Was trying to at least scrape together enough information about the event coming this year in October of 2024, about what would happen if the tides were 2 to 3 to possibly 5 times higher for just a week before and a week after, coming into October 23rd of 2024 this year. How would that disrupt our society? So that was my whole journey, and that's why Ryder and myself are sitting here today talking. Wanted to discuss a little bit of it and some of my findings.
Well, we're rapidly approaching that 2030 mark here in a few years. You're going to have to change that bio, Dave. You know what does happen when we hit 2030? I mean, your channel is Adapt 2030. What happens when it is 2030 if all of this is still around and things haven't gone completely and utterly into catastrophe? Because there's always a possibility, right, that everything turns out fine. I don't know, maybe I'm just wishful thinking or hopeful thinking there, but there's always that possibility.
There is, and I'm just going to quit the channel and say I totally had gotten it wrong, so I don't even believe my own reality anymore at that point, and I'll have to probably check myself into some sanatorium to try to revamp my mind into whatever I built for myself as awakened reality is definitely distorted. But if you do look out at it, it seems that the elitists are getting us to do exactly that, build the reality for them. And these last set of economic meetings here with the WEF, they're very clean on their playbook moving out. It's going to be a very rapid fashion in the way that your arm's going to be twisted, or society's arms are going to be twisted. But you can already see the amount of pushback is causing them some duress already, that not everybody's going to go quietly into the night. So is it built around us and our compliance and our building their reality for them? But now there seems to be, like, a call, a wrench dropped into the jet engine there, because it doesn't seem that their plans are going smoothly. So will they move to all-out brute force? But generally through history, what you realize is all-out brute force just never works, because it's easy to do a soft, invisible prison. But once you go to the brute force mechanism, because you've run out of options, people quickly awake, and it seems that then there's 10 times more pushback than the soft, illusionary route for control.
I mean, here's what I'm saying. Okay, so nothing is really built to last, not even our society, right? I mean, you buy something, it breaks very quickly, and you have to buy a new one. I mean, that's consumerism 101. If people want to know more about that, they should look into the light bulb conspiracy. There's a fantastic documentary made on that in 2010. But anyway, my point is the only things that seem to last are appliances and tools from decades ago, right? Those refrigerators from the 60s and 70s are going to outlast us all, Dave, right? So now, let's say now you walk into an antique store today, all of that stuff still works. It's all very usable because it's mostly manual things like cranks and presses, and they're all built very well. Now, here's what I'm getting at. If you were to, let's fast forward 100 years into the future. Let's say that me and you, Dave, or anyone that's listening to this just hops in a time machine and travels 100 years into the future. What do you think would be in those antique stores? The same stuff that's in it to this very day, or the stuff that's being made today?
Depends what type of quality of things you purchase today. Because me personally, I do two routes at this juncture. I either buy a high quality Japanese made like hand saw for, things that I have the farm, or I go to estate sales and I get the antiques from estate sales. Or you can spend the money, which costs quite a bit more, to get something of durable quality today. But the world we live in today is not made for buying a lot of high quality things because it's so absurdly expensive compared to, if you go into Tractor Supply or some kind of, I don't know, there's probably those stores near you. Everything's made in China. The tools are made to get like one or two projects done just around the house, then it's going to break. Versus getting something that has a lifetime guarantee on, like a Craftsman wrench set or some sort of, ratchet sets or something like this that's going to be incredibly durable, where you get lifetime warranties with it, but then you're going to pay 3 or 5 times more than just the junk coming out. So there's two options now. And what I think would be in the future would be the copper pipes that are still here from right now.
Yes.
One thing that's surprising is the amount of copper piping that I saw in Europe still.
And that's another thing,
America,
Dave.
We've gone pretty much to packs and plastic and disposables, but going in, we stayed in a fair few nice Airbnbs because being off season and shoulder season, you get everything at a third of the price right now. It's a little chillier. Everything's not green and vegetative and pretty with all the flowers and the balconies and everything, but it's still pretty rad because you're in old Europe and incredibly old Croatia. But I noticed the copper piping was everywhere. And again, the benefits of copper piping throughout time immemorial, disease control and all these things. And those durables will still be around. The things that we might make today in terms of durability, like that Craftsman set that's going to cost you 5 times more, or some kind of tough tools, those will still be here. But as a general rule, I can't say maybe 5% of the stuff that's currently made today versus 95% of the stuff that was made 50 years ago. I'm looking around it. So I'm sitting in a kitchen / office here, and I'm looking at the durability of things going, none of the light bulbs will work because they're all meant to burn out after a certain time. And this whole thing, and I'm going to say another thing kind of on that goes with this. Everything in Europe has switched to LED lighting 100%. But the thing was, when I would get ready to line up photos, that I had that blink, 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 blink every time we were taking photos. So the forcing of us to go away from regular bulbs, not the curly Q CFL bulbs, but just what you would consider a regular incandescent bulb, very soft, very pleasing, very soothing when you have that light in your home, like a Tesla bulb that you see in coffee shops, where you can see the lines coming out. You can turn it up or down, very much like the sun. When you turn up the electrical frequency or charge, flow into the sun, it glows brighter, just like it does with these light bulbs I'm looking at here in a coffee shop, where you can then turn it down or up. That's a Birkeland current turning up the frequency and the electrical conductivity, electromagnetism of the sun, or you turn it down and it dims and is visibly noticeable. But that is one thing that really freaked me out, was the blinking of the LEDs that was really visible anytime I held up my phone camera. Not so much visible in my SLR camera when I was shooting further afield, when I have a telephoto lens, when I was like looking up at the steeple tops, or some kind of ether harvesting domes and balls on top of cathedrals and things. Not visible then, but the phone picked up all the blinking LEDs. So those things are meant to break at a certain number of hours too. Like, I can't even see our light bulbs. I go to estate sales, I'll get light bulbs from like the 1950s that still screw into the socket. It's crazy. Even in the 1950s, there were preppers everywhere. They'd buy like 1,000 light bulbs, and you go in and you can get 100 light bulbs in a box still that totally work, of just like soft white light from GE. And those are still around, but none of these LEDs will be around, nothing. But that really, the disruption in the sleep patterns too is what I noticed, because I only have a couple LEDs in my house, but over there in Europe, 100% is. So everywhere you go, every room you turn on, everywhere you try to, even the night lights that you turn on before you're getting ready to go to bed, they're all blinking the whole time, and it's just really a disruptive light frequency zone around in Europe right now. So I was trying to go somewhere with a point with that, of something not being left, but bricks probably will be left, maybe some stone, something like that, but nothing else. Maybe that's the reason that when we approached 2030, that whoever started manufacturing at that time and doing this understood that we were at the end of the age, and that it would be not worth the time, effort, money, capital input to allow people to keep anything, because it was all going to break anyway. So give them, less quality products.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that you bring up this copper piping as well, because copper is one of the most conductive elements that we have on the earth, and it's interesting that it's all PVC pipe now, and they made people switch to PVC pipe, and that makes you question, like, why? Why did they do that? And PVC pipe is made out of plastics, all the plastics that are in our food, plastics that is in our water. It's disrupting our body. But I really think that, and this is going to lead into your research that you're doing at the moment, I really don't think people understand how finite our society is, right? Literally everything can be gone in the matter of minutes. One flip of the switch, the internet goes down, we're screwed. We're literally screwed. Everything has been digitized. Documents, records, money, banks, books, grocery stores, post office, And I understand why they did that. It's for efficiency and getting things done quicker. But the problem comes in when you've built your entire system on top of that, right? Nothing's going to last. If the internet goes down, this generation literally has nothing. And the people that think that they're making a difference on the internet, well, they aren't, if they can just be erased, right? And in 100 years in the future, no one would even know that we existed. And that is a very high possibility. I mean, think about it. What has the last 23 years been about? It's been about the internet. It's how everyone communicates. It's how people get their voice out there through social media. You create content. That's what this show is. That's what your show is. And that's what a lot of people's lives revolve around, is the internet. Take that away, we got nothing. And I guarantee in 100 years, if the internet was to go down, it just gets wiped. In 100 years, it'll be like we didn't even exist.
And you look at the quality of home building today too. These homes are not built for 100 years of durability. Homes that were built in the 1950s, yeah. But you look at today's just prefab construction, slap up a bunch of homes with like 2 feet between each other with the yards with their low maintenance, and you have your fee and somebody else mows your yard for you. Like those kind of buildings will fall down in 40 years. Because I'd seen the most interesting documentary about what would happen after a nuclear war, and not the nuclear war point, but what it was talking about after humanity quit inhabiting cities. Within 300 years, there would be nothing left except the most girthy of what you consider like superstructures holding up 8-lane highways and foundations of buildings. Even the aluminum would have corroded, the glass would have shattered. And after 1,000 years, there's absolutely zero trace of humanity. What would you be finding a quote unquote megalith would just be like that, an 8-lane highway, concrete superstructure that was holding it up. We'd look at it and go, there's no carvings or no markings. We don't know when the era was, but we know it was big. Look at the substrate that they poured into this thing. And that's kind of where, the archaeologists would be at. They'd probably be trying to compare our concrete with Roman concrete. And be like, why was the Roman concrete so much more durable? We're looking at something from 3,000 years ago. You're 1,000 years in the future. So you're looking at something 3,000 years prior, which is much higher quality on the durability than this new substrate stuff. What happened? They de-evolved in society. So even concrete, our current concrete, is not even made to last. Think about the Roman concrete. I went around a couple of Colosseums, and here's a real interesting one for you. There's a city called Verona, Verona, and they have a full Colosseum in there. It used to seat 30,000 people. The thing is, it's smaller than the original one, which is another full floor taller, or another archway, much taller, and the base of it is at least double the width of the base of the stones. So what was told to me was they could not replicate the technology in the Roman era to build what they had found as their own cultural layer previously. So you got to realize the ancient Romans, when they went cruising around, they were finding different layers beneath them as well that they were re-inhabiting or refinding. But some of the stuff was so big, like part of a Colosseum. We always attribute the Romans, the Roman Colosseum. Well, that's small stuff in comparison. In Rome, they had to dig their Colosseum out. Like if you find a lot of the older photos, I encourage you to look at Rome and go into ancient Rome image gallery, say 1850, 1880 or something. And you'll find a whole bunch of images of Rome where they're actually digging the mud out from around the Colosseum. Like it is nowhere remotely flat, what we see in today's images where there's little Vespas cruising around. It was mud 20 feet deep up through that thing. And then they were digging out a huge amount of Rome as we understand it was covered in 20 feet of mud. And then we're up in Verona also. For them, the ancient Romans, quote unquote, that had the best technology, best concrete, best engineering, best aqueducts, best everything, they could not replicate the previous society before them of building on the girth and the size. They were just like, whoa, this is way out of the complexity is too big. The stones are too big. It's way outside of our realms of being able, we'll just make it smaller, but same, but different. And, the old ones stand, there's one part of the wall on the old one that stands outside the new one. And it's just mind blowing to look at the size of the old one. Like, that's a previous reset society that built that first one. Romans replicated the second ones. And, one point to that is another thing that was noticeable, because once you go and you start cruising around the museums, you're going to come into a lot of statues that were damaged. And I was asking the curator there, I was like, I know they did a lot of purposeful damage to these statues. Like, what was it? Why did they go on? Christian era begins, Pisces begins. They moved out of Aries. They moved into Pisces with the birth of Christ, the fish. Before it was Aries, the ram, the lamb. And prior to that, it was Taurus, the bull. So there's a lot of bull iconography everywhere. But the one thing, moving from Aries into Pisces, I was like, why were the Christians so destructive on everything? And he's like, I don't know. It seems like they were trying to just break away the entire old world because it was a new world. So they were trying to destroy everything of the old world. And my light bulb came on. I'm like, That's exactly right. Because we just moved out of Pisces into Aquarius, and then look what's happening in just 5 years of the destruction of the old world. So it seems like when we enter into a new age, the old age is destroyed on purpose, whether it be stone or whether it be digital or whether it be what, paper mache, I don't care. They destroy everything of the vestige of the old world to usher in the new world, the new energy, and all things from the old time, for a better term, are destroyed because they want you to know that you're in a new era. Because those statues all had the same damage to them. They ripped off the noses. And before, if you didn't know this, like any kind of large marble statues that would have been from Greece or Rome had crystals in the eyes, whether it would have been sapphires and some of the more, ornate kind of what you consider emperor type palace things, or to regular what you consider just like crystals of, white crystals. But each set of statues had eyes that literally glowed from crystals being inserted in the eyes. And they would rip off the noses, gouge out the eyes, rip off the head, cut off the hands, chip as much as they could off of the clothing that would be, it looked like a wavy clothing off that, and then just throw it off to the side. It took them several centuries to do that, but they definitely had removed or tried to destroy and remove vestiges of the old world as we moved into Pisces. And it wasn't like Christian era and the Christian, what you consider, you can attest better than me, around 300 AD or so is when Christianity really solidified itself. So between that zero mark era all the way until 300 AD, Christianity wasn't fully where you understand it is today with the church and all this thing. But for those 300 years, it was just a destruction fest. And when I look now, from Pisces into Aquarius, we just moved in there December of 2020. Oh man, there's been a lot of damage so far to our society in just 5 years, but it's all digital. So it's going to be way easier to destroy than a bunch of stone with crystal eyes.
Yes, I think that is the real conspiracy. They make things not durable. They make things not to last. They turn everything digital. And all of my work has been done on the internet, right? My channel, my podcast, my documentary, JFKX, on Amazon Prime, by the way. It's all on the internet, and it can be taken away very easily. If by some chance the internet gets wiped, there wouldn't be any physical evidence to prove any of the work that we've done, right? Now, people would say, oh, well, make sure everything is backed up onto a hard drive. And I do that, right? But here's the thing, Dave, that I don't think people are really thinking about. Who's to say that in the future, people will even be able to use a USB drive or a Type-C connector? We've seen how fast our technology has went. It used to be floppy disk to store your information on. And now no one has a floppy disk drive. Floppy disk drives are completely obsolete. So why do we believe that in the future, USB drives won't be obsolete? So that means even if someone finds your hard drive in the future, they aren't even going to be able to figure out a way to use it or get any of the information off of it, which I think is the case for a lot of these lost civilizations. My theory is that they were using a technology that we have absolutely no idea about or how to figure it out because it was so different than ours. So even if we were to find something, let's say from a couple of thousand or however long you think the last advanced civilization was, even if we have something that resembles what we have now, can we figure out how to use it? Which then really makes me think about, I don't want to really change the topic here at all. I want to keep on this topic, but it makes me think about like these UFOs, right? And the technology that we've supposedly reverse engineered from extraterrestrials and these people talking about a crash retrieval, right? I think the crash retrieval narrative is a giant misnomer. I don't think that the crash retrieval means that anybody witnessed something falling out of the sky, or they saw it on radar, so then they immediately went to it to retrieve it and get the technology to try and reverse engineer it. Crash retrieval. All right, I guess I'll give you an example. Let's say that me and you, Dave, I'm giving a lot of examples, but me and you, Dave, we went to Afghanistan, right? We decided to do an archaeological dig, right? We do the archaeological dig. We find some sort of craft. We find something that we have absolutely no idea about. That would be considered a crash retrieval. The crash retrieval doesn't depict an amount of time that it's been here. So I think when people are, talking about these crash retrieval stuff, it's not what it actually seems like that it is. I think that a lot of the stuff we have just dug up and we have found from ancient civilizations. And that's one of the interesting things that Bob Lazar talked about as well. I don't believe Bob Lazar's story, but it's a possibility that he was shown some things, and he said that he was under the impression that at least one of them were dug up, which then brings into a whole other line of thought. But back to people thinking that the technology that we have now is still going to be a valuable thing in the future. I don't think that it is. A USB drive that we have now is not going to be it's not going to be still the same thing in 200 to 300 years in the future.
I remember floppy disks. I remember my first floppy disk was 64K. 64K. That was big. You were able to put a couple documents on it, like before you'd have to walk around with two huge thick books like this thick, like, how much those would weigh, 5-8 pounds. Or you could carry it around this little floppy thing. Now remember, we're only talking about what you consider today like Microsoft Word documents. And even then it wasn't MS Word. That took too much. It was more just like a notepad. So yeah, those readers are gone. I mean, some people collect that kind of stuff, like Atari games and floppy disk readers, but I mean, there's probably only 1 in a million people who still have one of those that can access that technology. Because like your crash retrieval, for an example of finding advanced ether harvesting equipment that is still visible in what you can say like cathedrals and churches and spires and this sort of thing. For me, the equivalent of finding an old engine block in the middle of the forest somewhere. The wheels are gone. There's no frame on the car. It's just you found an engine block that's been stripped. There's no valves, nothing. You just found an engine block, and it was significant to do something to drive. There was another purpose for it, and you knew it was to create power to do something. And that's kind of where we sit with this whole ether harvesting, Tartaria technology. Because one thing I did see in the cathedrals that I noticed in not everywhere, a couple places, and then also was being actively stripped out of Croatia in a place called Šibenik, there's this copper, it's probably about 2 to 3 inches thick, running down the floors and then up each of the, so let's say it's an 8-sided dome cathedral that you're going into, like the copper, a good 2 to 3 inches wide. I don't know. I couldn't see the thickness of it, but it was running up and then up to the center and then up into wherever the spire was that was coming down. I've seen it at a couple places where it was still very visible in Italy, and they didn't take it out of the flooring or up on the sides of the walls going up to the top of the top of the dome and the cathedrals there. But in Šibenik, they were actually chipping it out of the wall. Like you could see where the whole chipping mark had gone up, where somebody had come in with like brute force to chip it and rip it out. But before they had a chance to, like smooth it back over. And this was in, where was it? This is in Split. No, it was in Zagreb, excuse me. but they had ripped it out of the wall, but they hadn't refaced the wall. So they left the gouge marks which were like, you know, a good 6-8 inches wide, something like that, at that V where you could see they were getting down into it. So it makes me question, was it a square of copper that was running, or was it a V? Because the chip out marks all were V's going up all the different sides of this one cathedral that we went into. And then it was also being refaced from the outside, but the amount of like scaffolding and stuff was just mind blowing, how much scaffolding they had to put up. And I was like, do you think they built that back then? Look at the scaffolding just to repair it today. And the immensity of the scaffolding was anything that you could see with a 20 or 30 floor building. And we're like, no, they didn't build that. They repaired it. And that was the whole story. The running theme of everything is they just kept walking in and finding previous settlements that were abandoned. Like, here's a good one for you. You know, Palmanova, the one Starfort city that I sent you a bunch of images about.
I'm trying to bring that up right now.
That was an abandoned city. The people in the Protectorate of Venice at the time was actually paying people to come up to live there. Now, here's the story. This Starfort city is built it starts construction in 1598. They finished raising this city 50 foot into the air from a flat plain. It's 2.9 miles around, just on the edge of the walls, 30 feet tall. So I did some rough calculations because I brought a ruler with me, so I measured the bricks when I was out there. So they needed roughly 750 million bricks. And then it was 2 layers deep. So we're actually looking at 1.5 billion bricks. And they were supposed to bring this in, bricks manufactured elsewhere, transported in there, and using, let's say, 1 billion bricks, we'll keep it at even billion. And they built that entire city in 30 years. But then on the outside of the brick layering, they had facing stones that were cut at a perfect 45-degree angle, and they needed about 75 million of those. So we're supposed to believe the historical record is they came in and it was a flat plain, like think about going into like Kansas, completely flat. And they said, you know what, that's not going to be good enough. Yeah, there it is. That's not going to be good enough. Let's just raise 50 feet into the air and we'll fill it in with earth. But it's actually a substrate that I have some pictures of behind the walls that were broken apart in one single area. That people are leaving clues. You know, they always have to leave you the truth. So if you look deep enough, you're going to find the truth somewhere in the site. So they raised this whole city up 50 feet. 2.9 miles around on the inner city. What you're looking at is the full construction of supposedly that furthest outer ring there was constructed by Napoleon in the 1800s. So it went through 3 different constructive eras. The first era went from like 1598 to 1630 or so, and that's interesting because that was the beginning of the Maunder minimum, and everything ceased for 120, 130 years. But within that first 30 years, they were able to move 1 billion bricks, build wall 2.9 miles around, 30 feet tall, put facing stones on it, and then upraise and lift the city full 50 feet and do that entire earthwork 50 feet deep. So we're talking about cubic miles of earth moving. And then I asked the curator, I said, well, where'd y'all get the bricks from? Because I'm looking at a lot of bricks out here on the wall. You know, I walked around, there's a huge amount of bricks, and they were so proud and happy. Oh, look at the construction we did. I said, well, by my estimation, because I measured some of the bricks, you needed almost 1 billion bricks. You needed 1.5 billion bricks. Just on the outer surface, you need 750 million bricks. Where did you get all the bricks from? Because I don't see any brick kilns. Oh, we brought them up from all these places. So she named like 3 or 4 places. And I was like, well, what's the average amount of bricks that you could put on a wagon at that time in the 1600s? Like, what's the weight on you couldn't put a ton on a wagon at that time. I mean, you would need multiple bulls or multiple horses in the energy in for the energy out. EROEI is going to be just blown off the charts trying to move a literal ton of something. And then I was like, well, how many broken wagon wheels are there laying around? Because I would expect to see tens of thousands of broken wagon wheels if you're going to be moving that much weight all over the place. Like, you should have like a Himalayan size, mountain of broken wagon wheels laying around, especially when you went to do the unloading and something tilted off to the side and broke both hubs or spokes. I mean, I should see like 100,000 broken spokes somewhere. There are millions of broken spokes. if there's that much moving of brick going on. So just the sheer amount of volume. And then I did a calculation by using some rough online stuff here to get the calculation of 3,000 cubic meters of something that, what concrete, for a better term, to be able to put the bricks together. So we're talking about 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, 1 cubic meter. You need 3,000 cubic meters just for the concrete mix in between that. I'm like, just dump trucks that we do today, that would take thousands of those dump trucks of what we do today. Like, who's mixing that? Where was the mixing facility? Where's your lime pits? Like, how do they mix all that? This place is so pristine. There's like really nothing left of the construction era. So the reason I'm telling you all this is, after all the construction was done, you think it would be like the most massive, commerce-ridden, just epicenter of business, because you need that much material, that much goods coming back and forth. You need that much, feed to be brought in for all the horses and bulls, and you need all the food for all the workers and the housing and this and that and that. And then by 1640, they can't get anybody to live there. So in Venice, they were asking and giving prisoners free homes that were pre-built up in this city to go live up there, because they couldn't get anybody to live there. Now, the stories are just so like fanciful. And then some people I talked to that actually live in the city were like, no, the Romans found this and they just kind of walked into it. It was already built.
Well, that's the theory with a lot of these structures, is no one really knows where they came from, how they were there. When you ask the historians, they'll be like, well, previous people just came in and it was already here.
Mm-hmm. I would share my screen with you, Ryder, but I don't know how to share the screen here.
You go down to present and then hit screen share.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
And then whatever you share will, you can share your entire screen, or you can just share pictures, certain pictures at a time. It's kind of confusing. It's not like Zoom. Zoom's a little different, but yeah, if you want to share the entire screen, a little window will pop up and it'll say Chrome tab, window tab, or entire screen. You can just do it window by window. But while you're figuring that out, this other photo that you sent me, I think is really interesting, because this looks like it was like they're trying to build like a fortress. Like, and I don't think that these things around it are like mountains. I think that they're actual structures that somebody built. And if you hit the share thing, it'll pop up on my end, and
I'll just go through your slides. I can explain this one easily. Now, this is in the Nautical Museum, and you read the reviews online about going into the Venice Nautical Museum. They're like, oh, this is a dusty old thing. They haven't curated this thing. And damn, the thing's from like the 1980s. They haven't updated anything. I'm like, that's where I'm going, because they didn't hide anything yet. So there's this series of probably 20 of these. And what it is, it's what the Italian Navy and the Italian military controlled as bastions along the coast. And it's a 3D. It's actually 3D. It's on the wall. It pops out. They did a 3D modeling of it. So from 1692, this is Isola Siate Fortezza di Corfu. And they'll show you anno, in the year of 1692. So they go through all the physical ports that they owned and controlled during that time, and they're all star forts, every single one of them. And you look at the size of this thing, that's like 2 kilometers long, or a little over 1.2 miles across that peninsula there. So you can go and find these same areas today. And I encourage you to do the matchups, because mainly they stripped away a lot of the star fort and they turned them into these new quote unquote shipping container ports. Now they use the base of it, of course, because it's already built. What they do strip out is the actual formations of it, but that was a terraformed land there. And then offshore, also that island that's been terraformed a little bit. But I have a dozen of these images here, but I thought this was a real good one to show you that even back in the late 1600s, you're looking at how long would this take to construct first? And it looks like it's been there for quite some time because the city is built and nestled within that. So, the time era of this fortification being built is not, in my opinion, the same time era that the city that exists within there was built. The fortifications were first. Those who came after found it, and it was abandoned. And then they started to build in what we consider that, haphazard, non-grid laid out, just city, because they found what they found. Okay, hey man, this place is a little better repaired than the rest. Why don't we start living here first? And we'll kind of work through it as we move through the decades here. Because that seemed to be the running theme, is this previous builder society one step back. And I would say that collapse of this builder society was 3,500 years ago. Because another thing that, talking to an archaeologist over in Verona, really very well spoken, just incredibly knowledgeable curator there. I forget her name, but she was so nice to stick with me through the museum, because we got there first thing. It was like 9 a.m. and nobody was there. The first person didn't pop in till 10. So we were the only two, me and my wife, in the museum walking around there. So the curator is with us. She took us to the Neanderthal area, and then I was asking about Denisovans, and she's like, we don't have any Denisovan sites here. But then they had this huge timeline on the wall, and it was very clearly marked where the electromagnetic excursions had happened, because they had 36,000 years, and then it came down, then they had 24,000 years, then they had 12,000 years. And then suddenly, the Younger Dryas impact. And once I said, hey, you have the Younger Dryas demarcated here at 12,500 years, that right away she knew that I knew something. So I asked her, you don't have it from 12,500 years to 8,500 years, you have zero. And she's like, yeah, we don't have anything. It's called the barren period. And I was like, oh, okay. So the barren period, like nothing, zero, not even a single artifact from 12,500 up until 8,500. And some of the most lush, verdant crop areas of what you consider northern Italy now. Wine, fields, wheat, whatever, nothing, zero. And suddenly around 8,500 years ago, she said that they became, suddenly independent tribes just popped out of nowhere. And, they only had they only had oral languages, which they passed down through, their traditions. And then suddenly, she says, around 7,000 years ago, the Samarians come up and pop in and start to give them written language, and then start to help them with agriculture. So for 1,500 years, they lived as independent tribes, for a better term, or independent peoples up in northern Italy up there. And then suddenly, I don't know what they were doing. They don't know what they were doing either. Just a hunter-gatherers or whatever. And then the Samarians pop in and give them all this tech, all this agricultural knowledge. And within like less than 1,000 years, they went from full nomadic peoples into massive city building. That, like the great change, their timelines seem to be like just strangely off as well. And then the collapse periods definitely are the 3,500 year period, the 7,000 year period, and then there's smaller collapses within that of something on the 400 year, and then the 2,000 year change of ages. So somewhere in there's a looping of overlapping collapse periods. Some are greater than others, but for sure that era, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this fortification building was 3,500 years old.
So you think that the fortification, now what would be the reason for the fortification of this part of land? I mean, obviously, scavengers and invaders and people that would want to, take from you, barbaric like people, but would this serve any other purpose other than to keep people out?
Well, we don't know if the capability for electrical generation, not on hydro, but using, any type of, like the pyramids sit on top of aquifers. And then, Wyden Cliff Tower with Tesla using also was on top of an aquifer. So there seems to be something with directed water through canals that's also an integral part of ethereal electricity and wireless transmission of power. Now, we don't know if there were metals encapsulated in this, or what the substrate was within that could generate. Now, maybe we're looking at a giant power station for that part of the peninsula. We just don't know. The tech is so old and the building and the earthworks are so old that what's been stripped off of there for new building materials. Okay, so these people come in, they find an uninhabited city that's mainly wrecked from a reset, floods, it could be waves, whatever. They need to rebuild. So the first thing they're going to do is they're not going to go out and manufacture bricks. They're going to strip stuff off of the hills and the fortifications that are really close to them. And this is a recurring theme too, is a lot of stuff was stripped off of the existing earthworks to use to build the city inside. So think about the water usage. Yeah, it's a great way. Okay, but what's the real purpose? Are you going to tell me you're just going to do that much work to cut off, a 2-mile journey of a boat going through there? They could just go around that little peninsula on that small little island, like, in an extra hour or two. So why would you do that much work? They're carving water canals to save on transit time. Well, dude, you're talking about an extra hour going around the tip of that thing. Well, come on, I don't believe that.
We had boats back then? We were seafaring people, right? Or have we not discovered boats by this point?
Oh, absolutely. They're finding all kind of inland boats. That was another recurring theme too, was because I asked the curator everywhere I went, I don't care what place I went to, I was like, are there any stories and themes of waves or wave damage or kind of really high tides for, small periods that would have disrupted, sea commerce or have destroyed or at least, inundated the coastal areas of some cities? And the answer was yes, 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 and yes, again and again and again. And there are more than a handful of ports that were completely abandoned across northern Italy. Now, the story goes, well, the river stopped running through, so they abandoned the port. But now these ports are like, half a mile inland. And I'm like, I get it. If it was a water port up the Amazon, I get it if the river changes course. But this is a seaport. It really shouldn't matter that much if the river coming from a mountain somewhere changes course. You're on the sea. It really shouldn't matter too much. But to have the excuses of, well, the river changed course and then everything infilled, and that's why all these ports are at the uniform level of probably, half a mile inland all along a line there. Like, what happened to that? What pushed all that earth in there? What caused that? Like subsistence, perhaps, or, land raising, perhaps. I mean, what causes that? And the old port of Rome too, if you go down on the west side and you go from Rome directly west out to the coast, you'll find some old lithographs of these giant, just like magnificently giant pre-Greek ports out there. One is a perfect octagon, but that thing's like 1.5 miles inland now. But then it was from an octagon into a half moon, into a larger half moon with 100-foot tall statues standing there at the port entrance, and all that's gone. And the only thing left of it now is the octagon. I did a full video on that one. And you can still see vestiges using Google Earth of the furthest, largest outer port rings that are underwater now, completely 100% underwater. And then that middle port ring area has disappeared because they put an airport there. But the last little bit of the octagon is still visible. It's a lake in itself, and it's an archaeological. You have to buy a ticket to go in and see it. But that whole area too, that follows right along with the inundation of. So you're telling me that, and here's the thing too, when you're looking at today's measurements, the octagon shape of that lake is still visible, and you can see the causeway that connects to the center part, but then the outer rings are still underwater out in the ocean. We're talking something that was built thousands of years ago that was at least 1 mile deep as a port when you come in through. Like what we do today with our ports could rival that, but you're talking 3,000, 3,500 years ago, when you start to make the entry coming past the breakwall and the causeways there, that still sends you another more than 1 mile inland before you finally reach the disembarkation point. I mean, that is a lot of stone and buildings and earthwork to put together, supposedly as a inferior and prehistoric peoples, almost is the way that they try to teach us in history, that anything prior to 500 years ago, they were living in mud huts and kind of thing. But you go back and they'll give it to the Greek and Romans. Yeah, they had some temples. Yeah, they had this, the Temple of Jupiter, whatever. but they never talk about the port construction because it's so vast, it rivals anything we've done today. And again, the building construction of the old amphitheaters, or the Colosseums, excuse me, it rivals, if the smallest ones that were reconstructed that they couldn't build to the previous like girth and giantness of the builders of the previous reset, still sat 30,000 people. That's what our Colosseums and things seat today. Apparently the large one that was built prior could seat up to 100,000 people. So that rivals any of our stadiums that we have today for playoff games. You're looking at orders of magnitude larger, but that's not supposed to exist in the historical past. That's the recurring theme, is everything that shouldn't exist in the past exists in the past. And we never talk about it. And what's the timeline for the reset, and why did it reset? That's the whole thing. Why did it reset every single time? Why are we finding we've gone from largeness to smaller to less, to more inferior, less, I guess, missing a word there. It's early in the morning anyway.
No, I think I appreciate you for being here. It definitely is super early. It's light where you are and it's dark where I am. But I wanted to share this image because I found this image very interesting that you sent me. What's going on in this picture?
Well, this is the coat of arms for the city of Palmanova. That star fort that you showed me, this is the coat of arms for their city.
Yeah, the double-headed eagle at the top left is
Austrian. Yeah, originally from Austria. Now that's another thing. Anywhere that this fingerprint of the builders has gone contains an eagle, double-headed eagle, at least in Europe. And then you pointed out, rightly so, that that has moved over to America with a single eagle. But where the fingerprint of the old builders and the old knowledge remains, it's a double-headed eagle. And I didn't find it everywhere. I only found it some places. So obviously, it's a sign also.
Well, it's interesting because the original double-headed eagle you can track back to Sumer. And you said that the Samarians came to that, where that star fort was located, and basically gave them agriculture, right? So maybe they adopted this sigil as well, along with the other things that they showed them. Very interesting. And I talked to my friend Paul Knight that does a lot of research into Janus. His channel on YouTube is the Black Sheep Researcher. And he's talking about Janus being this double-headed entity. And Janus is like the god of like everything. He's the god of archways. He's the god of doorways. He's the god of keys. And he's always symbolized with 2 heads or 3 heads. And that's immediately when I looked at this image, I was like, that's Janus right there at the top. And then how that's been carried over into the United States with the one-headed eagle. It's just really fascinating and really interesting, the symbolism here. And this one has a crown over its head. Hey, I don't know. It's very interesting. And you got this chimera thing down here. What is that, like the body of a lion? And then I was talking to you about the book of Ezekiel earlier when we were discussing Ezekiel seeing the being coming down from the sky. I think it had 5 heads, I believe. One of an ox, one of an eagle, one of a lion, and a few other animals. But you got a lion body here and a double-headed eagle. I don't know what it means, but it's interesting.
And I would say one thing. I have and this came to me in a church, a cathedral of all things. So I was looking for the answers. I just can't figure this thing out. Why is this? The cross that you're looking at is the galactic cross. They encoded that in the religion so we would not forget it when we came to this new turning coming from Pisces to Aquarius. Like the best way to encode messages is into religion itself. So I know a lot of people are going to have a difficult time, with a lot of the research I'm going to be putting out. But what we're looking at, the reason the cross is there is this reference time of the returning of Christ and the returning of the Christ consciousness. They're talking about the Birkeland current and the physical change of energetic flow through our solar system that's going to bring in heightened awareness to the human being. And, you know, you consider Christ consciousness at a higher level, a higher vibrating, more understanding in the interwovenness of all complex life and energies that exist within dimensionality, as well as how we are connected through spirit back to creator. Like, we've lost that. We went through the dark ages. That is coming back again. So in the literal sense, if you're looking about an energy transmutation as we're moving through space, you know, astrology explains through those different zodiac signs that move every 2,000 years. We just moved into another one, just moved into Aquarius. And it's interesting that the biblical references are all talking about the return of Christ right as we exit Pisces, which was the beginning at the birth of Christ, into Aquarius right now. And that cross you're seeing there is not a crucifixion cross. That is the galactic cross, that we are moving into another galactic cross, and a time of disruption ensues once again. I have a couple, you know, oil paintings from the 1400s where Christ he's not on the cross. His head is laying exactly in the center of that, and it looks like the old Rosicrucian cross, but his halo is so gigantic. I've never seen a halo coming off of, you know, a divinity figure like that, square right in the middle of the cross. So there's a lot of things that were encoded in biblical paintings, because you have to realize how powerful the church was at that time. You know, they were going to burn Copernicus alive for saying that the sun was the center of our solar system. So to encode this knowledge, which was being passed down through quote unquote secret societies, had to be done in a biblical contextual way. So when I'm looking at saints, they're not saints, they are the planets. And they put the different configurations. It's no different than us looking at like a solar system scope model where the planets would reside in the heavens on their orbits in different times of the year. Well, all you have to do is just take the planets and turn them into saints and put them in that same rotation, and you can find, you know, different alignments too. And when you see the halos glowing on the heads of a lot of these saints, or Mary and baby Jesus and thing, Mary's always depicted as this yellow clothing with the glowing, you know, aura around the head. That's the sun. And the baby Jesus, that's the sun protecting us, the earth, with the electromagnetic field. Now, it's interesting because sometimes you see Mary super glowing and the earth is not glowing, and it's kind of tipped on the side like this in a distress state. But then other times, baby Jesus has a glowing halo and Mary has a glowing halo, and they're holding each other and they're in symbiosis with the two magnetic fields matching. And then you can look on the outside and you can see where Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are represented by the staff, which would be the planets themselves. And then also you can see the Saturnian rings, very clean. Once you start to see it, you're like, oh, that's not a halo, man. Those are rings. They knew what Saturn looked like way back then. Then you start to take a whole different look at the encoding of paintings on how they were representing not only orbital flows, but the energetic electromagnetic effects between those planetary bodies, and also disruptions in that cause distress on Earth right here. And, you know, a lot of people are going to have a very difficult time and very big problem that are super dogmatic about the decoding of these paintings, because that, in my opinion, is the only way you could have hidden this information is in plain sight. That's the only way it could be done. And it had to be done under the guise and the rules of the church. So everything had to be in a biblical text. So how would you disguise it? But it's all there for, once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. It's very difficult to unsee once you see it.
Well, this double-headed eagle right here has the crown on the top of, well, is that, do they have crowns on top of their heads and then one big crown over top of them? I mean, that could be depicted as the corona of the sun as well. And the crown of thorns on Jesus can be depicted as the corona around the sun. Halo can be depicted as the corona around the sun. You know, it's sun god worship.
Yeah, what about the filaments coming off the sun? If you had, you know, a highly electrified state and you had like, you know, 20, 30 filaments coming off the sun that were visible from our planet, then that would be the crown of thorns, would it not?
That's right. And I have a few other pictures that you sent me that I want to present. Here, you sent this one. What is this here? This looks like a UFO, dude. Taking pictures of UFOs over there, dude. Shining this beam onto something, onto the boat. Abducting people, bro.
Yeah, these are the Venetian coins here. So what you see, the lion is referenced down to the bottom left again. That is a very, very clean piece of iconography. Now, I am wondering if it was the time of Leo, which takes us back to, the time of the construction of the Sphinx and a lot of the things that were. Now, is it that time they're referencing, or is it the old stories of the time of the beginning that they understood these energetic changes were happening at the time of Leo? Because if you go Leo, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, and you're way back at the other side of the galactic cross at that point. Now, this energetic thing is another common theme of out of these what you consider old buildings or temples of. There seems to be some energy, magic energy redirected. Now, you could take it a million ways. Was it mirrors? Was it plasma? What was it? What was the machinery used to generate that type of solar, for a better term, glowing beams to come out of this? But you see this in many a place, and it's coming out. The oil paintings also from the 1400s have this a lot. The ones in the 1600s do not. So I noticed a couple things. When you're rolling back into the late 1300s and the early 14 to mid 1500s, there is a lot of pre and post cataclysmic damage showed. Like you might see some where there's perfect archways and everything's well kept. And then the next set, those archways are broken and there's trees growing out of the top of them. And it's looked like people just wandered by and then just like, hey, there's a city here, we'll take it. So you're seeing cleanly pre-cataclysm and post-cataclysm in that 150-year period of paintings. But a lot of that pre-cataclysmic stuff has a huge amount of these kind of rays coming out of the temple buildings. And I can't explain it either. I just thought it was a cool shot to take. And it's an impression of a coin that was issued in Venice. And I don't have the date of issuance. I'm sure it was in the late 1500s, though.
If you showed this to a ufologist, Dave, they would say it's proof of extraterrestrials, bro.
Man, just proved it right there, the lion, man. You knew it.
Well, it's interesting, too, because of the lion. Some researchers believe that the Sphinx in Egypt was a lion and that it was originally pointed at Leo, which would make sense.
It would, yeah. Do you have a couple more shots? I know I sent you a few more, and once you do that, I'll roll into a couple of my own slides here, too.
Yes, we got.
But this energetic theme, the ancients seem to have some sort of technology that would allow them to resonate this sort of. Yeah, and again, this is Coronelli. He's the most famous cartographer. He did both celestial globes and terrestrial globes, both. And for me, man, these celestial globes are dynamite because they show the energy flows on them. And not only this one, but for some reason, when the Earth passes through and hits into somewhere along this line of where we sit in the heavens, look at those current flows coming out. That's so cleanly, you can't describe any other way than that's an amplified current flow along a line somewhere. Today, we would call that a Birkeland current. But the convergence of three Birkeland currents represented in a map from the early 16 or late 1500s on a celestial globe is quite interesting for me. Like they're understanding of plasma physics and energetic ropes across the universe here in our wider galaxy is just mind-blowing. Like, where did they get that knowledge from? Like, this is encoded information that was there in plain sight for all to see. It was a mythical, fanciful. No, it wasn't. They were representing the current flows in different regions of space as we move through. So they knew where the energetics would change as the Earth passed through this and our movement around the galaxy. So somebody had the knowledge that passed it to them, and they were hiding it in plain sight, well, through their mythical schools as well.
Well, that's my other question about these maps that are, depicting other land masses, Asia being one giant land mass. And I'm sure you have a few slides that you're going to share of the maps. I don't have the screenshots of the maps, but how did they know what everything looked like? How were those maps originally drawn? Like, was it just based off of memory? Because I'm guessing that's how a lot of the original maps were, especially of the United States. Whenever, people first came over, they would go back to England and like draw what they saw. So are these like drawings from memory? Like, what's going on? Did they have some sort of flight capabilities that they were able to see it from the sky? Which then brings in a whole other realm of questioning.
Some of those answers I don't have answers for. Those questions I just don't have answers for. So let me see if I can share a screen for you quick. I'm going to try to continue on with that. So
Okay.
let me see. I'm just going to share the screen here. Select the tab to share. I'm going to select a window, I guess. But I'm on, let me see, the Venice Museum. Okay. Actually, I want to share this. See if I can share this with you. Are you seeing anything yet there?
You got to hit share, and then it'll pop up on the bottom of my screen, and then I can bring it on to here it is. Yep.
Okay, so I want to share. Are you seeing a globe view here?
What's on this screen is a bunch of small pictures. You can probably click on.
Yeah, I don't want those. What I really want, I want to share you the larger picture that I'm in my open image viewer right now. So let me see if I can try one more time with you here.
Okay.
I usually use Zoom with this, so forgive me, everybody out there. I'm learning the tech right here. Let me hit the preset. Maybe it's slides. Have no slides.
It would be share screen, and then you can, if you have it already, the photo that you want to share already opened on your desktop or your laptop, then you click window. If you did, then you click window on the second tab across from.
Okay, gotcha.
And then you click the image or whatever it is that you want to share.
Okay, it's not letting me do that again. Let me share the entire screen. No. Let me see here. Yeah, it's just not letting me pull up that screen, which is interesting. Why not? It's allowing me to. Let me try to do it this way and see if I can share. Let me try that one more time. Let me go down to my globes, and we can move through the globes here.
Can you just click on make the image larger of whatever it is you want?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see what this does here. All right, did you see the globe pop up big now again?
No, they're all small still.
Damn. Okay, why is that? Why can't I? All right, I'm trying to. Let me see if I can share here. Hold on. Yeah, I'm just unable to share anything off the screen with my photo thing there. Are you able to pull up a couple more of those globes that I sent you with Tartaria and that those structures below that?
Let me see if I got them on the.
I'm just unable to share my my photo screen with you. That's kind of crazy why I can't, but.
Try and pull some up here. I got the.
Yeah, there should be a couple.
Got the sundial one. I got. You sent me a few links.
Oh, those were just links of globes that were.
Do you want me to pull those up?
Yeah, you could do. I thought I'd sent you some link or some actual Tartaria images from the globes that were. Because that was the recurring theme too, was these globes that are in the museums, these large ones, they're probably like 4 feet wide, done late 1500s, early 1600s. They have Baja disconnected from California, they have Tartaria, and they have Japan as one continuous island. So for me, this is a very near post-Ice Age map. These are not current maps that we're looking at. They're source maps that were sent down. Like I have 600 plus photos of just the globes that I took, of all these different kind of globes. There were several of them. Now, one of the ones that I thought was a watermark on the bottom, it was the part of the Piri Reis map that we understand is the Sea Kings map.
Here's one of the globes.
Yeah, that's the celestial globe there again. Now, they show the head of Medusa, and they also show, the current flows that are moving around in the solar, through the spiral arm of our galaxy, and how they look at these because when you're looking at this, they were trying to depict to you an energetic frequency of animals that they understood at that time and the interplay of these energies based on like how a bull and a horse might interact, or a bear and a horse might interact together. So you have to look at it in a different sense of just that itself. Hemisphere of there was always a phoenix, and it was always right next to the Birkeland currents and the Pisces fish. So what's interesting for me is in the Pisces fish, you'll see the Birkeland current, but then right below that, there's a phoenix. So as you're transiting, if you would, and you were following the zodiac around, as soon as we transited through the Pisces area and that ceased, then boom, we get the phoenix, which is always, what is the phoenix? That's always a harbinger of reset,
It's interesting, Dave, because I put a phoenix in the background of the thumbnail of this video. What a coincidence.
Okay, this is off the Nautical Museum here. So this is Tartaria, and this is the flag of Tartaria that they would fly on their ships. Now, I'm trying to clean up some photos because photographing oil paintings is a different ball game in itself because there's so much reflectivity. So you always have to be at like an angle to get it. But some of these battle paintings, were 20-foot long oil paintings. So to try to grab, battle scenes of ships in between this, that, and the other, of star forts and this, it takes a fair minute to clean that up. So this flag that you're seeing here is the actual Tartarian flag, but that is also in 1400 oil paintings when they had naval battles that ships were flying this flag right here. And you'll also see that long streamer one that I sent you, the long red streamer one. That is also a depiction of Tartaria and their flag. Like if you do Google image search, you'll find Tartaria, the flag, or you'll find the mythical animal. Well, that mythical animal is on that like battle flag, that long pennant one. Yeah, you got the long pennant below it, and I sent you the one image that was also just the red image, the pennant itself. And thank you. Coffee time.
That's right. Got to have coffee. You got to fuel up. I got it on me too. It's super late.
Yeah, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to pop back up on my Skype and see if I can't send you a couple images live. Like hopefully I can post edit this when I put it up on my channel here for you. All right, there we are. Let me see if I can send you something here out of my.
Oh, I think I found one of them.
Yeah, you'll find that coin again too. I'm going to send you the coin is another big one with the lions on the coin. That's a huge one. And whatever it is, that mythical lion that's represented in so many places and spaces, that's the big thing is why is it so front and center of a mythical creature on things that when they're supposed to be so realist at the time, it doesn't make sense for me. But here, I'm going to send you a quick Tartaria image. Take a look at that one.
Is this the one that you're sending or a different one?
Yeah, let me look here. Yeah, that's it. So that's Tartaria image. Like this is on the Coronelli globes. Now, Coronelli did, dozens of globes. And mainly he was pulling from source maps. Like almost 800 images of just these globes. The Coronelli image at the very bottom where Antarctica should be, not discovered in the late early 1600s. He has that exact one piece from the Period Reefs map plugged into the exact spot right under South America, but the rest of Antarctica is blank because they didn't have a source map for it. But whatever it was, he was able to scrape that map and plug it into the correct position below South America. So for me, at first I thought it was a watermark, like, oh man, like who the hell would spill some water on this thing and damage the globe? Because it looked like a squiggly watermark on the bottom. And then I saw the original in the humidity controlled, glass encapsulation area. And sure enough, that same squiggly line was there. And I'm like, you know what, let me take a closer look at that. So again, going through trying to get Photoshop and, change the contrast so things pop out. It's going to take a fair 100 hours of trying to work with photos here to get them clean enough to really like, this is what's like masked and hidden in this place. Like,
where were these globes at? Where were these globes at?
They're in Venice, in a museum in Venice. And the cartographer's name is Coronelli, and he's the most famous cartographer in Italy.
How big were these? Were they really big? Could you walk all around them, or was there like
Yeah, they're about 4 feet across.
Wow.
Yeah, and they actually have a mounting that's on the floor, so they're they're on some sort of like metal spindle that moves around, and then they have the latitude and longitude on those iron bars that are coming down onto the wood on the floor there.
And when do they say that these were created?
Early 1600s.
Wow. So what do they think about Tartaria and this or Tartar? I think Tartar was the original name for it. What do they say that it was?
They don't. They never even realized it as being something significant or special to even look at. It's just part of what was. Like for us, we're like, Tartaria, there's a thing on the map. For them, they're like, they had battles with this kingdom, or they traded with it at some time in the past. So for them, it's just, all right, Phoenicians, cool. Like it really doesn't stick out in their whole time frame of things. For us in the West, it does. Something different here in America and Australia, and the research of Tartaria, it seems to be like this mystical kingdom thing that is just like hidden in history. But over in places like Venice, it's part of what was in their trading partners and what was in their sea battles for battle over, port facilities and kingdoms of times past. It is what it is.
Now, just for the audience that's listening, you took these photos, right? You didn't.
Yeah, these are all my own photos. That's right.
You didn't take these off of the internet or any of that nonsense. This isn't from Google. You were actually there. You actually took the photos of these globes.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing. Like I was a real tall guy. You got to realize that this thing's encapsulated in like a 5 foot tall glass box, humidity controlled. And this is the top of the globe. So, I mean, I'm standing there going away like this, like trying to take my camera, standing on my tippy toes, trying to get this thing to focus in on the top of the globe. And I noticed that right away with Tartaria, and I was like, what else is up there too? So I took a few more shots of the tops of the globes too, because some of those older source maps show some islands up in the Arctic, but I don't see that on these globes here. I got to see what I can do with the resolution and what I can do with the contrast. But just as a quick visual glimpse, I just don't see that kind of 4 islands that are, half, pizza shapes that sandwich together that we see in some of those, maps that show 4 giant islands in the middle of the Arctic. Like that's not on these globes. But I do think these are a far older globe, because if you're looking far over to the east, you see what appears to be as Japan as one giant island, not a set of islands disconnected with sea level rise. So, you're looking at these maps, I do believe, were when sea levels were far, far lower than they are today. So, put me a time on that when Japan was one contiguous solid island.
Yeah, I think it was just important for me to mention that you actually took these photos, because whenever you're searching online for a lot of this stuff, dude, you don't know what's been edited, you don't know what's been photoshopped. They could just be photoshopping in Tartaria name into a lot of these old maps. You never really know, but this is legit. You've seen this with your own eyes. This is a picture that you took, and it says Tartaria on it.
Yeah, what's interesting is below the tar, look at that, the structures there, those are not mountains. So the depictions of mountains are cleanly, they're very different. Those are structures. So what are those things anyway? Do you think? I mean, they look teepee-like-ish.
But then how do you know the placement of where these structures actually are, and if you don't have an aerial view of it? That's my thing of this. Like, how do you know the layout of this map? I don't know. It's awful. It's pretty suspicious. Like, how would you know the placement of where all these trees are and where these what you're saying are structures, if you don't have a topographical look at it?
A lot of unknowns in history, it does seem. Here, I'm going to send you some Baja California maps here that are disconnected. Here, I'm sending you 3 images right now, and see if you can pull these up. Because
Okay.
another thing that's quite interesting is in the center of the United States, and what we consider like the Mississippian cultures, they have a giant image of what looks like a giant Stonehenge. And then I found another globe online, as you say, that matched up, but the area that looks like a very clean Stonehenge that's depicted in this globe, which I took the images myself, that there's a later rendition of another cartographer about maybe 50 years later. I forget his name. He shows something like that in the middle of along the Mississippi River, but it just looks like a circle with like 3 things coming out of it. It's not, nearly as dense of the thing. So pop these images open, and I really am surprised at what I had found in these images also. I just sent them to you on Skype. Did you see those 3 come through?
Yeah, really quickly before I get these pulled up, comment on this coin here really quickly.
Yeah, again, this is a mythical coin, Venice issue. So what is it with this chimera / lion mythical beast that everybody was so in tune with, or worshipped, or found as a source of wealth and control and power? Because it's represented in the coat of arms. And if anybody studies heraldry out there, you'll understand about that. But it's front and center of the control center of the seas of the Adriatic and the overland routes and the wealth and the power and the trade of Venice, which also I can't believe the stories of the construction of Venice. They're saying that they, were running from marauders, and, they went out and pounded a bunch of sticks in the ground, and they put stone layers, two layers deep, and then they built all these cathedrals in the city on top of just what we consider sticks in the water. Okay, well, some of these poles from trees were 75 feet long that went down through the mud layer and then hit the clay layer at the bottom. And they said that there's tens of millions of these poles that have been pounded in, and then they put dual layers of rock as their like substrate, and then they build on top of that with an outer casing set of stones to prevent water damage from wave action. Now, if you've ever been to Venice, that thing's like 4 miles long by a mile wide, with some of the largest cathedrals in Italy, and it's supposed to be all built on top of what you consider trees with, like a pencil shape, dug and slammed down into the clay below. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? That's the story? That if it's true, and they do find when they, repair some buildings, that these things have been pounded in, but they fossilized. Like somehow the minerals had been replaced for these trees that were fully slammed down through the mud into the clay, had somehow turned into fossilized rock, hardened. And I'm like, this is not a new building thing. If it is, and they do find when they repair buildings this type of thing, but then it's all wrapped in metal to keep those so they don't move back and forth. So the entire set of whatever trees were rammed down in through the mud layer down to the clay layer were all connected by a metal lattice, double stone layers on top, outer facing stones, and then they built on top of that. That is not our construction. That is construction from far long ago, where technology was eclipsing anything that we have today. You can't tell me that you went out into the sea 4 miles out off the coast and decided to start pounding 10-foot long, 75-foot long logs into the ocean, and then put substrate on top of that, and then build an entire city. And I'm not talking a city. I am talking one of the greatest cities on the planet. And the largest cathedrals on our planet sit on top of sticks, basically, is what they're telling you as the story, all built in a few hundred years. Impossible, absolutely impossible to believe when you see it. Impossible. But I'll leave it there, man. And that's why I said there's mythical this mythical, I don't know.
Here's the pictures of the other globes that you just sent.
Okay, what do you see there? I see Baja California disconnected from California. So we are talking long ago mappage here.
Yep, that's what it looks like.
Yep. Now, if you go to the next one that's a little bit wider, that encapsulates all of America there. If you take a look, there's the next one that shows that part of Baja California, the center of the United States, and Florida.
Yep.
The Florida coastline looks pretty similar to what it is today, but you'll notice, for those of you who follow rivers, that the river, as we know, is the Mississippi, is coming out in the wrong place. And Florida is much wider, also going out toward the Bahamas.
Now, can these be geographical errors? You know, it's a high possibility, but this map
cartographers were put to death if they faked the figure. That was one thing that a lot of people didn't want to be cartographers, because if you made mistakes, you were put to death. So, you know, that being part of your job description, you mess it up, you fake it, there's a wrong thing, you know, because entire navies and entire empires were built on them understanding where things were. Trade routes, armies, movement of goods, you know, entire societies and civilizations were built on the correctness of the details of these maps.
It almost looks like the entire West Coast, like there's like a river running through, separating the entire, it would be California, Oregon, and Washington.
Yeah, the Yucatan Peninsula is also a little bit quirky. Hispaniola, when you go down to, you know, down to where like Puerto Rico is and Dominican Republic, etc., Cuba, that also looks very much larger than it is today, meaning sea levels were lower. And then if you look in the middle of the Mississippi Valley there, you see that giant thing that looks like a Stonehenge, for a better term. But the Mississippi River exits through Texas out into the Gulf of Mexico.
See if I can zoom in on this a little bit.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, right in the center there. So Mississippi River is coming out in the wrong place. Now, to get a river that wrong, that's like a pilot not knowing how to read a compass. All right.
I wish these were sharp enough to where you could really be able to read it.
Yeah,
read the words.
It's the best I could do. And again, I'm trying to clean it up, but I think if I, you know, get the contrast boosted a little bit, some of the writing might be a little more visible. And again, like I said, I got so many of these images, I might have actually zoomed in on the writing there in another image or so.
Nouveau Mexico. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
I was talking with Ransom on my program, and I gave him this map, and he goes, "Yeah, man, all the mountains seem to match up in the correct position," because he lives out in Utah. So he was saying, "Yeah, you can see the mountain ranges that I recognize here as well." And it says New Guadalajara, like Guadalajara, Mexico, like Guadalajara. And then you got the Stonehenge type of thing right there, and off to the right or to the east.
All right, here.
So for me, what we're looking at is somebody who made a series of maps when the sea level was far lower and the land contours were different. That part of what you're looking at there is now sandwiched against California. So what kind of earth change would be required to take that disconnected landmass and smash it against? That's where the fault line is. So if you look at the New Madrid or the San Andreas Fault, that's where that piece is now sandwiched up against California.
That's where it break off. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it breaks off, or where it reconnected. Like San Andreas Fault right there is that reconnection/disconnection spot. So this gives validity to massive earth change somewhere along the way.
Asteroid impact, natural disaster.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. I mean, there's several people have theories. I think there's another one. Did we already look at this one? This is the third one that you sent.
Yeah, because I was looking a little bit further south on that, and you can clearly see that big line of mountains there would be the Himalayan mountains. And what I was hoping to zoom in on is the far east there, where you see the latitude, demarcation there with that piece of metal going across the globe. To zoom in where Japan is, because it shows it is a contiguous island, and Taiwan's much, much larger than it is today also. So if you go into what you consider the islands of the east, yeah, and I'll go a little more east on that, pull that thing over to, and now there's your little TP section there.
I'm trying to get it over.
Non-Mo Poplar, or whatever that is. Yeah, so you're looking at Japan right there. So you can see the Korean Peninsula comes down. And there's a lot more landmass there at the bottom of the Korean Peninsula. Now with that Jeju Island, that's totally water separated, but it looks like, there's a bunch of teeth islands coming off of southern Korea down to Jeju Island. That's 200 or some feet lower sea level. And then if we look at Japan, obviously it's more of one contiguous island than it is a bunch of separated islands. Yeah, and here's an interesting one. Look at Taiwan right there. The size of Taiwan is easily 25 to 30% larger than it is today.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so this is a series of maps with sea level, I'm going to say approximately 200 foot, maybe not full 400 foot, because when I started to look down where like Indonesia was at the full glaciation, that was one gigantic landmass from Thailand all the way down through Indonesia. There was like no water separation, but in this series of maps, there's some water separation. So I'm going to say sea levels are probably about 200 foot lower than they are today based on this map. So how far back in history do we need to go where sea levels were 200 feet lower? And this just blows everything out of the water that we understand in terms of like their technology and understanding of mathematics, to be able to create maps of this prior than 6,000 years.
So do you think that the entire globe, they referred to it as Tartaria? You think?
No, definitely not. I'm curious how they thought the kingdoms that inhabited these areas were referred to.
I'm just curious because it seems like it's got Tartaria on all of the maps. So you would think that it would be all referred to as, like the entire globe would be referred to as Tartaria, just like some people believe that Atlantis wasn't just one singular city, like it was the entire Earth, like the entire Earth was called Atlantis.
Because you look at the dollar dominance today, everywhere you go, you can find a US dollar. And can you go back to that map 1 second? I remember when we were talking, Ransom told me something about that map. If you could pop that one back up again, please.
Yes. Just a second. Boom. Here we are.
So global civilization. Yeah. Now, if you could zoom in on where it said Tartaria to the west there, you'll see the Caspian Sea.
Okay, hold on. Let me get it.
To the west of the buildings there. Yeah. Now, can you zoom in a tiny bit more to where it says Caspia?
Yeah, let me try.
That lake that's right there in the center. There's a lake, right? Okay, now go west a little bit. Okay. That's the Caspian Sea right there. So what don't you see next to it? The Black Sea is not there. The depression didn't fill in. So this is pre-flood, like it didn't flood yet. The Black Sea area, this is something that's far older. You're looking at the Black Sea flooding. They say it come in around 8,000 years ago. That before that, there was no Black Sea prior to, say, 8,000 years prior, because some sort of flood came in, some sort of land subsidence happened. And this is where you find a lot in the Chaldean. A lot of their societies 40 feet underwater. You found that thing that looks like the Millennium Falcon that was underwater too in the Black Sea, some 40, 50 feet deep, something like that.
That they equate to not
create the Black Sea in these map series here. So how far back with 8,000 years? What is going on with our history here? Full in display out in front of you. But we have Ice Age, Middle Ice Age maps here or something, or coming out of the Ice Age when the floods were occurring, but it didn't get to that point yet. So if sea levels were 200 or 250 feet lower, the Black Sea wouldn't be there yet, because the water hadn't risen past that, break point where it started flowing into that depression area there. Only at the end, when the ice was melting more and the sea levels were rising, did it breach that natural barrier and then started filling in. And like water, once it starts flowing, it just broke and filled in that whole area. But we are not seeing the Black Sea over there anywhere. So put a date on that for me before the Black Sea flooded.
Meaning that it was pre-flood. You know what they say that Millennium Falcon that you just commented about, they say that was naturally forming, that it was not man-made, that erosion and nature created that weird step formation of the Millennium Falcon under the sea. It's unbelievable. But this moves up the date, if you're correct, this moves up the date of a big flood to way more recent than what is commonly accepted.
Again, it is what it is. You're just seeing what I saw too. I'm just trying to make sense of it because nothing makes sense. Like none of this map makes sense in terms of sea levels and how much land it is now comparatively. Because we can look at Google Earth or any kind of topography, and there's different kinds of softwares where you can remove water and get to different levels. So, and people can do that back and forth. People like to study, the full glaciation, 400 foot lower, water levels across our oceans during full glaciation. And there's software you can run it up, and then you can see the time it was comparatively to how high the water had been, like the reflooding. Can you imagine how cataclysmic that would have been? Because you got to think, full-blown glaciation is 90% of the time on our planet. So I'll be generous and say 80,000 years, the ice sheets were forming, and a good 50,000 years of solid time, everything was stabilized. Sea levels were 400 feet lower than they were now for 50,000 years. Imagine what kind of societies and civilizations could evolve along the coastlines in 50,000 years. I mean, look what we've done in 10,000 or 5,000 or even less, apparently, according to our history. So what did they do during 50,000 years of time? Well, they would have built along the seasides as well. And then suddenly sea levels rise 400 feet. And I would really like to take a look at the Navy maps where they imaged every single inch of the ocean bottoms. I'm sure there's vast cities across huge swaths of our, what would have been a 400 foot depth across the ocean right now.
What's the name of that? I think it's in China. It's either China or Japan, underneath the sea, where those statues are.
Yonaguni Island, or not that one?
It might be that one. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But that one was.
It's really on this map. If you swing way east, go way east on the map, east of Taiwan, you'll see those islands out there you're referring to. Yeah, keep going even further east. Yeah, right there. Okay, go south a little bit. Okay, so you're looking at Japan right there, close in. So you need to go a little bit south of Japan. You're going to be looking between Taiwan and Japan, and go a little more further south, because you're at the Korean Peninsula right now. So you need to go a little further south.
Forgetting how far zoomed in I am.
Okay, right there's Taiwan. Now, if you go a little bit north and east of Taiwan, those are where the Yonaguni Island site is, but it's not that big today. It's a little squirrely island out in the middle of nowhere. But these are vast islands. A little bit more west. Now a little more south. You're right in the center there, yeah, and just go south from there. Okay, a little more south, a little more south. Okay, a little more south. There you go, stop there. So Taiwan is that bigger island, and that's far larger than it is today. You look at today's Taiwan, and that whole jutting out piece to the west isn't there. But, it's interesting how you talk about the Millennium Falcon, because during the full-blown glaciation, Taiwan and China were connected by land. There was no water. And apparently there's temples in the channel there now that resembles something very similar to the Millennium Falcon that was discovered in the Black Sea, right in the channel there between Taiwan and mainland China. There's also one temple that used to snag and still does snag a lot of fishing nets. That's how they knew something was on the bottom there. And they sent sonar equipment down, and it looks very similar to that kind of backgrounded shape with the pincers and that sort of thing, just like the Millennium Falcon.
Have we even
Taiwan, you're looking at a reef system that's definitely not there in northern Taiwan. But then as soon as you jut to the east, there's your Yonaguni Island, and all that stuff is far larger than it is today. Like, I mean, massively much larger than it is today. You can barely even discern it as a dot on the map, the Yonaguni Island today. But look, that's a huge island in comparison. So that site at Yonaguni was 125 feet depth in the water. So if Ice Age, or this map was levels of 200-foot lower water levels, then of course they could have constructed something like that, and it would have been 100 foot above the water or 75 foot above water. There's your site.
I don't think we've mapped all of the ocean floor, right? There's no way that we've done that, correct?
I don't know. The Navy had been on a tangent there in the 1980s and 90s to go map out, and apparently every square inch of the ocean bottom has been mapped by the Navy, U.S. Navy. That's why I'm always wondering, like, what did they find in terms of cities at the 400-foot level just before the continental shelf drops off? Humans are humans. We would have done the exact same thing. We would have built on the coast because there would have been fish, there would have been trade, there would have been ships, there would have been rivers, there would have been fresh water, there would have been everything. So take New York City and put it 400 feet underwater, and then let tidal action scrape at it for 8,000 years, and then what's going to be left?
What we got now.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of information about that. New York is going to be hit with giant tidal wave. Same with California. Same with a lot of these cities as well. But all hearsay and all speculation. But before I let you go here, Dave, do you think this may be a different kind of topic, but it's definitely related? Do you think in the future humans will still be humans, or do you think that we'll be something else, like named something else? Will we be so modified through genetic alterations, robotics, and AI that future people on the planet will effectively no longer be human and be called something different?
Galactic cosmic rays with a decreased magnetic field will also change us. It wouldn't have to be exclusively augmented human. But think about through history, there's always been multiple sapient species living and coexisting together. And if you look at the timeline where the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, and now us, Homo sapiens sapien, and then whoosh, we're going to change again. So it seems about, every 30,000 years that we get into a new species of us. Now, galactic cosmic rays would be a huge part of that, because Robert Felix, who I knew before he passed, talked about the evolutionary leaps when we got into these giant cosmic ray bombardment events with a very low magnetic field around the sun that allowed more cosmic rays in. That also created massive biblical floods at the same time because of the cloud nucleation, the cloud building because of cosmic rays. And then if we did have an augmented human, like the World Economic Forum crowd talks about, that sapien species would be here, would still have the remaining Sasquatch DNA lineage that would still be here with us. We have reports of pygmies and that sort of thing, at very small 3-foot tall humanoids or human species through Indonesia and other parts in forests and deep forests around the world. So even currently, if you look at it, there's probably 4 different species of hominid on the planet, bipedal hominids. So if we were to add in an augmented human, that'd be another one. And then if we got galactic cosmic ray changes, we ourselves would bend. And I think we are at the last of what you consider Homo sapiens sapien, that we are into an event of species change again. And this is why a lot of things that we're seeing across the planet are taking place for continuity of species, continuity of government, continuity of economy. Like whatever's inbound, based on just the past cycles and understanding those, we are definitely at the cusp of something great and grandiose and gigantically civilization and species changing at our doorstep. We're not even at a doorstep. We're in the process of walking through it. Now, the intensity level to the point where society doesn't function anymore, we're getting very close to that day by day. And you see how the world starts to spin and how governments are reacting so much differently and causing so much chaos and disruption as a smoke screen and a screen of fuzz, so they can do things behind the scenes so you won't notice. Like something's getting very close where timelines are sped up. So back to your original question, the beginning of the program, what happens when we come to 2030 then? Well, we'll be deep into something where there'll be far less food production. Valentina Zarkova talked about when we come down to the minimum amount of food production on the planet for this cycle, it'll be at 2028. And as we see right now, we're going to come into this magnetic anomaly in 2024. And as our planet swings out in front of the sun in April of 2025, there's nothing to protect us. Everything in the entire solar system is behind us, gravitationally pulling whatever space debris into us directly into the face of our planet for about 4 to 5 months, from April probably through August, before we swing back around the sun again for some protection. So think about the cometary bombardment, and even if it's small space rocks by the millions coming in, that's going to freak a lot of people out, seeing continuous shooting stars, daylight, concussion bolides, and maybe even some ground strike stuff, to the point where everybody in every city, every day you wake up and look up, you're going to hear something or see something come flying in through our atmosphere. That is difficult to control a society at that point. Like these, that's why I call it the event. This is it. This coming up, I think this is all moving toward preparation for higher tides in and out of this October 23rd, 2024 event. A week before and a week after, if we get these much higher tides, because it was explained to me, the 4 gas giants, they line up. Yeah, if they have the extra gravitational interplay and electromagnetic looping interplay of just one single moon, that'll give us 2 moons of a gravitational effect. Like, how would having 2 moons bend our tides? That in itself would be enough to disrupt us for years into the future. To have tides 2 to 3 times higher coming in and going out for 2 weeks would disrupt everything. Not only will the water go low and much lower on the low tide, where some channels might be impassable, but coming back in and going much further in, and perhaps just a few days right at that electromagnetic disruption, maybe tides are 5 times higher. Just tidal action. Forget the breaking of bridges or conduits or pipelines or earthquakes or landslides or sinkholes forming. Forget all that. Just talk about tides only. And then we have the fuzz as we come around, as I call it, the fuzz. After the inner looping of that magnetic field, we start to pull away from that, but we get in front of the sun, and then it's Earth, the sun, all the gravitational bodies in the entire solar system looped into a very tight clumping in one quadrant. So they're going to pull everything directly into the face of our planet. That's a society disruptor in itself. So after that 2025 event, I could see why Valentina Zarkova was talking about we're going to have very limited food production, that governments need to stockpile. This is back in 2018 when she was talking about this. It was like 10 years. Like, we need to get ready right now for food production declines, and you need to start preparing for the 2028 food disruptions across the planet. Now, that all fits cleanly into a timeline of something happens with our global shipping, something happens that spooks the entire society where everybody just quits working and nothing's functional at that point. Economies aren't working. So we're back to like an agrarian society. And this is why she believes that at least electromagnetically, our jet streams are going to disrupt enough where we can't grow food, even if we want to on the commercial level today. So this is what's kind of inbound, and doing all the research here, I'm trying to put a timeline to it. And I think it's pretty close to previous timelines of disruption through the calendars here. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up really quickly. Because Time Magazine, there's like this whole thing where Mark Zuckerberg is building a underground bunker. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, he's not the only one.
Hold on,
You're
sure.
not the only one.
Sure,
Yeah.
really quickly before I let you go. Okay, this is Time Magazine. Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly building an underground bunker in Hawaii. Wow. I thought that this was just a rumor, but Time Magazine's reporting on it. Must be real, right? I don't know. But
Yeah, which
Meta
island is that? Is he building it on? Does it state which island it is?
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, co-founder and co-CEO of Chan Zuckerberg, plan to build a 5,000 square foot underground shelter on their Hawaii ranch, which is its own energy and food supplies. According to a Wired investigation published earlier this month, the plan is that the shelter door will be made of metal and filled with concrete, common in bunkers and bomb shelters. The news outlet reported an exclusive article citing planning documents and interviews. Gonna figure out where this bad boy is.
Yeah, what if they weld him in there? Like, yeah, those doors work, right? But if they get welded shut from the outside or whatever, dude, you're stuck.
They're probably not going to tell you where exactly is going on. I'm sure if you did a little research, you could figure out what property.
Yeah, there's a bunch of bunker builders down in New Zealand also. So think about that. Once the initial population collapse happens, like in Hawaii, there'll just be tens of thousands of people on the island left. You're not going to be able to sustain. Like I think, Maui, when I was living and working out there, it was like 200,000 people. And this was back in the 90s. But according to traditions and stories passed down, the average carrying capacity for Maui was about 20,000 people just living and working there naturally. What they could farm, what they could get from the ocean, about 20 to 30,000 maximum. At any time in the history in the past, that's all the people that were inhabiting the islands. There was not like hundreds of thousands of people on that island. The only reason is because we can bring ships in. If that carrying capacity knocked back down to like 20,000 people, and it'll probably even go lower because nobody's used to farming and fishing on their own except a few guys out there and a few families, it'd probably go down sub 10,000 people. And at that point, if you had weapons and you have your own, security forces and whatever, and you pop back out, then you're going to survive. Nobody's going to really mess with you. They're worried about survival themselves, and nobody's coming out there either after that. I guess that would be a cutoff zone for 50 to 100 years. How would you get back out to Hawaii if everything got disrupted to the point of disruption we're talking about? Hawaii, you'd have to sail out there yourself, and that's the only people that would arrive out there. There'd be no more airplanes. There'd be no more ships.
I mean, would that be a strategic location though? Would that would be kind of strategic, right? To where no one could really get to you.
Yep. And if you're at a higher elevation and you're on a dormant volcanic island and you're at a higher elevation, so even if there were waves that were 500 foot tall, it wouldn't hit you because, those islands, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, more than 10,000 feet, Haleakala, pushing 10,000 feet. So there's some higher elevations that even if it had some bigger waves, it wouldn't get up there. So I'm curious what the height of his elevation of his ranch is. I'm sure it's not beachside.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not either. I'm sure he's definitely up there. But Dave, thanks so much for coming on. Always a fascinating conversation. Always an honor to have you on, brother. Could you let people know if they would like to figure out more about your work? I got your link in the description, of course, and I'm sure people already know where to find you. But just for those that don't, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm focused on a Patreon channel now because I could see the diminishment of views and reach out on YouTube. It's getting less and less every day. So I'm pushing over onto Patreon where I'm doing a lot of exclusive content, like dissecting a huge amount of this stuff. Join me over there. That's Patreon/Adapt2030 and the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. The YouTube reach is really getting throttled down, especially now that the World Economic Forum is talking about we need to cut anybody who had disinformation about the climate. Just our conversation talking about the globes and how things are not with the timelines and sea levels, and that would be considered into the climate misinformation category because it doesn't follow the established narratives of sea level rise.
Yeah, but Dave, we got Tartaria in this video. The algorithms love Tartaria. I guarantee you, whenever you put this video on your channel, if you do, and you label it like Tartaria, mud flood, whatever, you're going to get thousands and thousands and thousands of views just by the title of Tartaria or mud flood. I promise.
No
the
way.
algorithm
I
just
thought they were trying to push that stuff too. too. They must want everybody out there confused in history, eh?
That's exactly what it is. But I promise you, if the first video that you drop, if you cut it up in the sections, you label it Tartaria mud flood, it'll probably be your most viewed video in a year.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I need to get the raw thing, and I want to cut this up. And yeah, it'll be on the Adapt 2030 channel. Also, BitChute, which is crazy because sometimes when this is the funniest thing on the metrics, I'll put a video up on BitChute and I'll get 50% of the views that I get on YouTube. But you got to realize that BitChute probably has 1/100th of the reach of YouTube. So, you know, if I get 20,000 views on a video on YouTube, I'll get 10,000 views on BitChute. I'm like, wait a minute, like it doesn't work like that. You know, it doesn't work like that on BitChute, man. You know, the reach is far less. And, you know, Brighteon TV, also with Mike Adams, I have my program every other Friday, 2 p.m. And I got my channel over on Brighteon as well. So,
yeah, it's just
the world is
interesting
shrinking
how
for those with producing true knowledge. They don't want a lot of things out there because people are going to get too prepared. They want less of a population. A smaller population is easier to control. And the more distracted and bombarded with confusing messages you are, the more they're able to prepare for continuity of everything behind the scenes because you're not in their way. Just remember that.
Yep, and it's going to get nothing but worse this year, I believe. But Dave, again, thanks so much for coming on. Honor and a privilege. And thanks everyone that was here in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. Candace, Sherry, Gesture, good to see you guys. And anybody else that was here, Big Lebowski, good to see you. Good to see you, Rebecca. Anybody else that contributed to amazing conversations in the chat, really appreciate you guys. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And check out my documentary, JFKX, on Amazon Prime. If you're outside of the country, you're not in the United States, you can get it on Vimeo. All the links are in the description. And if you have Tubi, I think Tubi is in Australia and Canada. It's also on Tubi as well. So if you're in a country that you can't get it on Amazon, you can watch it on Tubi. Thanks so much for being here, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye for now.